All right. Apologies for the delay. Here we are, back at it. So thanks for being here with us. We are working on this summary and conclusion. We've gone through all the, what are they called? All the different zodiacal signs, all the different astrological signs, and now we're back to the conclusion, summary and conclusion, back to the article that we read at the very beginning from Arnaldo Krumheller, Huiracocha, about alchemy. But before we jump into today's material, we'd like to review the previous class when we can. In that case, that was Pisces that we just read from Esoteric Treatise of Hermetic Astrology, and talked about the primordial waters, primordial life, the divine couple symbolized by the two fish. A lot of symbolism. Let's see what we've got here. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments area. We have arrived at the mother night of Egyptian cosmology, the profound ocean of Pisces, the initiatic limitless darkness of the absolute abstract space, the first element of the abyss, where the undines guard the Rheingold or the fire of the divine and genetic thought. Pisces is governed by Neptune, the planet of practical occultism, and by thundering Jupiter, the father of the gods. Pisces is wisely symbolized by two fish. The fish is the soma of the mysteries of Isis. The fish is the living symbol of primitive Gnostic Christianity. The two fish of Pisces, linked by a hyphen, have a profound Gnostic significance. They represent the two souls of the primordial Elohim, submerged within the deep waters of Mother Night. Right, those two souls that he mentioned are the human soul and the spiritual soul, sometimes referred to as Buddhi and Manas. We have already explained that the inner self, the being, Atman, has two souls, one feminine and the other masculine. We have already explained that the spiritual soul, Buddhi, is feminine, and that the human soul, superior Manas, is masculine. The sacred couple, the divine eternal matrimony, is always symbolized by two fish linked by a hyphen. That hyphen is the being that links the two souls together. The sacred couple, the two eternal fish, work within the waters of the abyss when the dawning of the Mahamvantara arrives. The two ineffable fish work under the direction of Atman, the inner being. However, it is good to remember that Isis and Osiris could never work in the great work without the famous Mercury of the secret philosophy. In this sexual Mercury lies the key to all power. A circle with a traversed line, a vertical traversed line, in hieratic symbolism, is the very sacred union of the eternal feminine with the eternal masculine, the integration of the opposites in the ineffable and divine essential monad. The monad, the being, surges forth from within the great mother space. From within the great ocean, the Elohim rise in order to work in the aurora or dawning of the cosmic day, the Mahamvantara. Water is the feminine element of all creation, from which the Latin mater and the terribly divine letter M originate. In Gnostic Christianity, Maria, or Mary, is the same as the Egyptian Isis, the mother of the cosmos, the eternal mother space, the profound waters of the abyss. The word Maria is divided into two syllables. The first is Mar, which reminds us of the deep ocean of Pisces. The second is Ia, which is a variant of Io, which gives us the mantra Io, the august name of Mother Space, the circle of nothingness from which everything emanates and everything returns, the one, the unique one of the manifested universe after the night of the great pralaya, or annihilation. Once the superior waters were separated from the inferior waters, then the light was made. In other words, the animating verb of the cosmos, the sun or child, surged forth into life. And this life took as its transmitting element the sun, which is found at the center of our solar system, like the heart within our organism. The fecundating vibrations of the sun are really the living elemental fire which condenses in the center of each planet, constituting the heart of it. All that light, all that life is represented by the 7 spirits before the throne, within the heart temple of each of the 7 planets of the solar system. The work of separating the superior waters from the inferior waters, separating the waters from the waters, corresponds to the work of the sacred couple. Each of the 7 spirits before the throne emanated from itself the sacred pair of fish in order for the couple to work in the dawning of creation with the power of Kriya Shakti, the power of the lost word, the power of will and yoga. The love of loves, the mystical passion of the last fire within the eternal husband and the divine wife are vital in order to separate the superior waters from the inferior waters. He provides the fire and she transmutes the waters, separating the superior from the inferior. The 2 fish then project that fire and that superior transmuted water upon the waters of the chaos, upon the cosmic matter or material for the worlds, upon the sleeping germs of existence. And then life sprouts forth. The entire work of creation is carried out with the help of the word, will, and yoga. In the beginning, the universe is subtle. Afterwards, it condenses materially, going through successive periods of progressive crystallization. Millions of universes exist in infinite space, within the bosom of Mother Space. Some universes are coming out of the pralaya, surging forth from within the deep waters of Pisces. Others are in full activity. Others are dissolving within the eternal waters. Isis or Osiris could not do anything without the sexual Mercury. The 2 eternal fish love, adore each other, and live always creating again and again. The fish is the most sacred symbol of primitive Gnostic Christianity. It is a pity that those of students of occultism have forgotten the gnosis of the fish. The age of Pisces should not have been a failure as it really was. The causa causorum of the Piscean failure was due to certain tenebrous elements who betrayed gnosis and preached certain agnostic or anti-Gnostic doctrines, underestimating the fish, discarding the religious wisdom, and sinking humanity into materialism. The result of the agnostic Christianity was the Marxist materialistic dialectic. The reaction against agnosticism was the godless and lawless repugnant materialism. It can be affirmed that the age of Pisces failed due to agnosticism. Jesus Christ and his 12 fishermen initiated an age that could well have been one of the greatest splendors. Jesus and his 12 Gnostic apostles indicated the precise path for the age of Pisces. Gnosticism, the wisdom of the fish. It is a pity that all the sacred books of the Holy Gnosis were burned and the sacred symbol of the fish forgotten. So obviously, part of our intention is to revive that ancient wisdom so that we can access it, because that ancient wisdom is within ourselves. And that's why these teachings resonate with us once we start studying them and understanding them more and more. In the class on Pisces, the previous one that we're summarizing now, it mentioned the need to vocalize daily for 1 hour, and then to vocalize I, E, O, U, A, S. But we do one for each breath, so it's really to elongate it. So for the first one, and then you'd inhale again, etc. We'd go through the different sounds in that way. So that's recommended practice for Pisces. And that was our summary today of the previous class, the last study of the zodiacal signs that we're going to do. And now we're going to jump into today's material. As always, please let us know if you have any questions or comments. So first, what we're doing is we're going to reread this same article, Alchemy, from Arnaldo Krumheller, Huiracocha, that was published in 1937. We read it at the very beginning in the introduction when we started almost a year ago. So let's see. Alchemy. Do not rely on the letter which kills, but on the spirit that gives life. The word alchemy is derived etymologically from the Egyptian language and signifies prepare the black. The black refers to the universal substance. The alchemists prepared a powder that some say was red. Cagliostro defined it thus, whereas others defined it as black. The universal substance is found everywhere and is the basis of everything. So remember, he says, when we say that alchemy means prepare the black, it means prepare the universal substance, right? The cosmic material. That's what we need to work with. And then it says the universal substance is found everywhere and is the basis of everything. It grows plants, and through its power we develop ourselves. The transmutation of the stone in the interior of the earth, the lava, is due to the impulse of that substance, which is diluted everywhere, and that the ancient alchemists unites, joins, and preserves for their work. This substance is found everywhere, but if the occultist does not find it in themselves, then they will not find it anywhere else. It is the raw material or the materia prima, the origin of everything, and is found everywhere, united with different substances. The substance in which it is most easily isolated is mercury, and it is for this reason that the ancients said that mercury was the source of everything. The alchemists of the Middle Ages had as their dogma, Mercurius philosophicum est negredo perfecta, which means the philosophical mercury is perfected blackness. the black perfected, that is, the raw material or materia prima, the universal substance, perfected. Then, as the alchemists observed the phenomenon of nature, they found a significant relationship between their work and the formation of the fetus in the womb. 40 days are required for the spermatozoa or spermatozoon to take human form. Afterwards, the formation of the human being is achieved in 7 divisions of that time, in a total 280 days. As it is above, so it is below. Just as the cell is formed, the human being is also formed. And just as the human being is formed, the universe is also formed. The alchemists deduced a scientific cosmogony from the whole human formation. What is interesting, then, is the relationship of the human being to the planetary exterior. That is to say, the influence which the stars and the planets exercise upon the growth, development, and destiny of the human being. Right? And that's what we've been studying. For a long time, astronomers were laughing when the alchemist astrologers claimed to find forces in the zodiac, since the astronomer was saying that this circle was imaginary and never real. Until finally the advancement of spectral analysis showed that there are different rays in each one, and that there are also different rays within the conjunction of the zodiacal signs, which they believed to only be imaginary. That was from Huiracocha. Then in the second half of the article, which he published the month afterwards in this magazine called the Rose Cross Review or the Rose Cross Magazine, it says, continuing to study alchemy, this word has given rise to different concepts according to the mental and developmental capacity of whosoever tries to analyze its real significance. The Rosicrucians of all times have seen in alchemy the most transcendental science, because for them said science holds the mystery of the generation and regeneration of all that exists. Symbolically, they see in alchemy the scientific system. Symbolically, they see in alchemy the scientific system for the realization of the magna obra of nature. In other words, the great work. This great work consists of realizing the transmutation of lead into gold. This beautiful symbolism tells us, in the spiritual sense, that the true Rose Cross adepts must transmute the lead of their personal, vulgar passions into the highest vibrations of the spirit of their inner nature. But scientifically, it also indicates something else. In the whole of nature, there is an alchemical process which is constantly verifying itself. Through time, the luminous radiation of the more evolved stars of a system intensifies through its radioactivity the evolution of the substances modifying them in such a way that evidently, through the ages, turns lead into gold. This is the reason why, as the centuries pass by, we proceed to find the majority of the gold in the bosom of our Mother Earth. By analogy, through the ages of evolution in the interior of man, there emerges an irradiation of a subtle material which permits him to express with great vigor the spiritual power which is in the pulsation of all that exists. What is necessary to differentiate is that alchemy is a process wherein the work is done with the spiritual force of life, and with chemistry, which many researchers mistakenly confuse with the first. Working only with the action of a physical fire in order to liquefy the metals and combine them to produce new compounds, but not by evolving substances as was commonly believed. But the symbolism is often misinterpreted when the aspirations of the study are of a purely materialistic order, right? When people just want gold to have gold, they don't understand the deeper significance. Hence, there have been false Rose-Cross adepts who, after beginning the mission to make physical gold, have spent the rest of their life in manipulations of a chemical order, believing themselves to be acting directly in the sphere of true and sacred spiritual alchemy. And not only in past epochs, but also today, we have corporations in the USA who call themselves Rose-Cross associations and that offer their students scales in order to weigh atoms and other things like that, so as to deceive unsuspecting people. It is not with this pretending that we negate the value of the physical sciences, much less the transcendence of chemistry. But it is our duty to indicate where truth and where error are to be found. Alchemy is a spiritual process in which the vibrations of life are progressively elevated from the slow state of semi-animal evolution to the superior state in which man should aspire by refining his internal culture, by means of the governing of his own nature, through the mental transmutation of his emotions into goodness and harmony, and also through the transubstantiation, of his creative force. So that the divine flame within the undefiled garment illuminates his inner senses in order for him to be able to progressively become the radiant philosophical stone of 3 divine colors which embody power, wisdom, and love, so that he can be a master and guide his younger brethren in the school of life. So we see here highlighted on your screen, through the transubstantiation of his creative force. He's talking about the human being and our creative force, right? It's something we've mentioned before, especially in Scorpio, since Scorpio rules the creative organs. So hopefully the part of the alchemy lecture that we read in the very first introductory class sounds different this time than it did when you first heard it. To complement the lecture that we just read, we'll read a little bit from an extract of a lecture called The Gnostic Vision of Sexuality, lecture 132 in El Quinto Evangelio, collection of lectures by Samael Aun Weor that were transcribed or recorded and transcribed in the 60s and 70s. This particular one's available in the Gnostic Rosicrucian Astrology, which is where you can find Huiracocha and Ardo Krumheller's zodiacal course as well. But let's check it out. Let's see how it's related to what we were just studying. What is missing here in this talk is to say how. I will be glad to explain a very unique trick that the medieval alchemists taught their disciples. The trick that I will teach you was also taught by men of science, such as Brown Sickward in the United States. Dr. Krumheller, medical colonel of our glorious Mexican army, taught it. Jung also taught it, and it is taught in the Asiatic schools of Oriental Tantrism. This is not something particular to me that I invented. I have learned from all these sages, and in your turn, they are communicating with you, not as an article of faith or as an unshakable dogma. No. If you want to accept it, accept it. If you do not want to accept it, do not accept it. Many schools have accepted it. Many schools have rejected it. Everyone is free to think as they like. I only give you my modest opinion. The trick is connection of the lingam yoni without orgasm or ejaculation of the eins seminis, the entity of the semen. The lingam, you already know, is the phallus. Yoni, you already know, is the uterus, the eternal feminine, the sexual organ of the woman. Dr. Krumheller said, or gave the formula in Latin as immissum membrum viral in vaginam feminina sin ejaculatione semenis. That's how Krumheller would give the formula in Latin. Some modern scientists have accepted it. There in the United States, the Oneida Society experimented with this formula. The Oneida Society, you can see what was done. They had about 25 couples, men and women, who worked with sex. During a certain time, they were ordered to copulate, but without orgasm. Then they were subjected to clinical trials. In the United States, it was possible to observe the complete semenization of the brain, the increased hormones in the blood, the complete improvement of the organism, the fortification of the sexual potency, etc., and many illnesses disappeared. When scientists researched the need to have children, they then also gave in the Oneida Society the freedom to copulate with the orgasm. Then reproduction was obtained. In this way, many experiments were made in that Oneida Society. In any case, the interesting thing about this nice trick, which constitutes the secret secretorum of the medieval alchemists, consists in the sexual glands never degenerating. You know very well that when the sexual glands degenerate, the hypophysis or pituitary gland also degenerates, and all the glands of internal secretion degenerate. The whole nervous system goes through processes of degeneration, then decrepitude, and death occur. Why does old age exist? Simply because the sexual glands go into decrepitude. When they go into decrepitude, all the endocrine glands enter into decrepitude as well, and then the issue of old age and decrepitude manifests. But if there was a system that did not allow the sexual glands to degenerate, to not enter into decrepitude, then the whole nervous system could be preserved in perfect activity, and then there would be no old age, decrepitude, etc. That's obvious. Well, now, through this nice trick, connection of the lingam yoni without the orgasm, as the famous Dr. Krumheller and Brown Sickward said, it is then possible to maintain active sexual glands throughout one's whole life. This means that a man who practices such a system could reach the age of 90 or 100 years old and yet still with the ability to copulate and to freely enjoy sexual pleasure, which is a legitimate pleasure of the human being and not a sin, which is or something taboo, which is not a cause of shame or pretense, etc., but again, a legitimate right of the human being. Well, now, through the transmutation of the entity of the semen into energy, eins seminis, extraordinary psychological changes are possible, and the pineal gland develops. This gland was active in other times, in ancient times of history. Then the human being possessed that eye of which we speak. EYE. Homer in his Odyssey called it thus, the eye of Lacertides. The eye he saw on that terrible giant that intended then to devour him. This eye of Lacertides is not a mere legend without any foundation. Through sexual transmutation, this gland develops, entering into new activity. Here is that eye which allows one to perceive the ultra of things. The world is not only three-dimensional, as the illustrious ignoramuses believe. Our world exists in a fourth vertical as well. Furthermore, we can say with great emphasis that there is a fifth vertical, a sixth, and a seventh vertical as well. That is, we have never seen our world as it truly is, and we have not seen it because our five senses are degenerated, and our pineal gland is atrophied. There are other senses in us which are completely degenerated, in which are senses of perception, but they are also degenerated. If we managed to regenerate them, we could see the world as it is, with its 7 dimensions. So, the harsh reality of facts is that through sexual transmutation, you can regenerate the pineal gland, or third eye, and the other senses that have atrophied. Thus, we would have access to a world of extraordinary knowledge, and we would have access to the superior dimensions of nature and the cosmos. So we could see, hear, and touch, and even feel the great realities of life and death. We could grasp or capture all cosmic phenomena in themselves as they are and not as they appear. Transmutation is the key to change the seminal substance, to modify it into energy. Behold what is fundamental. The time has come to comprehend this thoroughly, integrally. If a man or a woman proposes to accomplish such a simple formula, with this trick that Brown Sickward teaches us, that Krumheller teaches us, and that the medieval alchemists teach us, I could say to you with great emphasis and absolute certainty that this man or woman would eventually transform him or herself into a superman or a superwoman. We all need to feel the necessity to change, to become something different. That is, if we are not reactionary, because conservative, retarded people do not want to change. But when one is truly revolutionary, one wants to be different. One wants to fundamentally change, to transform oneself into something different, becoming a superman or a superwoman, making the doctrine of Nietzsche a reality. And it is possible to change through sexual transmutation. The sexual force connects us with the fabric of existence. And I cannot deny you this understanding. We exist, we live, because we had a father and because we had a mother. In final synthesis, the root of our life is found in the sexual union of a man and a woman. Well, now if the sexual force, if the energy of sex has the power to connect us with the fabric of existence, then it is obvious that it is the only thing that has the ability, in truth, to radically transform us. In the world, there are many ideologies. In the world, there are many beliefs, and everyone is free to believe whatever they please. But the only force that has the ability to transform us is what created us, what connects us with the fabric of existence. I refer myself emphatically to the sexual force. Learning how to handle that wonderful energy of sex means becoming a master of creation. Let me reread that to you. Learning how to handle that wonderful energy of sex means becoming a master of creation. When the sacred sperm is transformed into energy, extraordinary psychosomatic changes occur. And remember that we're talking about the seed that exists in man and woman. So when it says a sacred sperm, it's talking about that seed element that both man and woman can transmute. We know well that those hormonal vessels of our gonads are. We know well what those hormonal vessels of our gonads are, how they work, how they pass hormones from vessel to vessel, how finally along the spermatic cords they reach the prostate, and through the fallopian tubes they reach the ovaries. We know well how valuable the prostate and ovaries are. Here, the biggest transformations of the Eint Seminis and of the hormones intimately or ultimately occur, entering into the bloodstream. The word hormone comes from a Greek root meaning longing to be and force of being. Hormones have been studied by our men of science. They are marvelous. Sexual hormones, for example, enter the bloodstream and accomplish wonders. When touching the endocrine glands, such as the thyroid, parathyroid, the kidneys, or adrenals, the thymus, etc. They stimulate them. Hormones stimulate them, making those little micro laboratories produce more hormones. And these hormones, produced in all the glands in general, enrich the bloodstream in an extraordinary way. And then ailments disappear. Diseases disappear. Unfortunately today, the sperm, the sacred seed that is prepared by the gonads and then rises or ascends to the prostate, is squandered. And the hormones in the famous zoosperms are even left in decompose when they are kicked out of the organism, when they are rejected. Right? That's what they teach us to do nowadays in our most modern cultures. To throw that special substance that connects us with the fabric of existence, and that if we learn to handle it, would allow us to become masters of creation. They teach us not to do that. So here we point you in that direction, and we suggest that you do your experiments. And as Samael Aun Weor says in this lecture, don't accept it or reject it. It's up to you. You have to decide. Some accept it, some reject it. But what we really want is for you to understand it. And that means experiments, practice, seeing what happens. Vocalization can help transmute the energy, pranayama, lamasarya exercises, rune exercises. There are various techniques, listening to classical music, going for walks in nature. There's lots of techniques that assist us in transmuting that energy. And then we just have a different outlook on life. We understand ourselves differently, and we understand the world differently. But when we throw that substance away, when we waste it through the spasm, through the orgasm, then we get momentary pleasure, but we lose that fuel, that foundation of our health and vitality, and we start to feel something is not right emotionally. And if we haven't heard about these teachings, maybe we try and find something wrong with an enemy, whether it be another country, a political opponent, or just an enemy, an opposite, a contrary to ourselves, whoever it may be. And then we start to try and resolve our emotional disequilibrium by looking outside to find a solution instead of looking inside. So this is the material that we wanted to present to you today, that we wanted to share with you. We have one more class next week where we'll do summary and conclusion number 2. That one's a bit longer, but we invite you to join us for that. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. And the other thing we'd like you to leave in the comment is what you'd like to study next. We've got some votes already, but we'll give you some choices to narrow it down. You're welcome to say any topic that interests you. But we said the mystery religions of the ancients. It's a 5-part series about the esoteric aspect of different religions. We study Egyptian, Christianity, Mithraism, Freemasonry, and try and do a summary of them all to show the overlap between them and the mystery school aspect of Christianity, which in many cases nowadays is not seen. But the ancient, or as we read in the lecture in the chapter on Pisces, the so-called primitive Christians, the ancient Christians, they had a mystery school. That is, they had initiations or levels that were not granted to the public, that you had to pass through certain tests, or we don't know exactly from books what exactly had to happen, but there were things that were private, that were esoteric, that were not for the public. And among them was the so-called Eucharist, or the taking of the bread and the wine. That was not something that was normally in ancient Christianity given publicly. So there's different things like that become very, very helpful to study and know, and to see that the flavor of the religion, of various religions that we have, the flavor of spiritual systems that we have, is different from the ancient flavor of spirituality, of religion, of how to connect with divinity. So, if you want to study that, the mystery religions of the ancients, that's an option. Another option is Gnostic chemistry and cosmology. And this is a class where we talk about the ray of creation in ascent and in descent, how Gnosis sees creation manifesting itself, the sort of repetition that Huiracocha talked about in his Alchemy article today, that as above, so below, that once we understand how the universe was created, at least theoretically, according to Kabbalistic models, we can say that it's the same process inside of us, same process of working with that ray of creation, the law of octaves, law of 3, law of 7, right? When we understand those things, it helps us, because then we say, oh, okay, well, if that's how divinity creates, we can become someone who does the same thing when we learn how to create within ourselves, right? When we learn how to work with that special energy that can make us into masters of creation. It's a matter of studying that and understanding it for ourselves, which means making mistakes and getting back up from the mistake and continuing on, persisting. And another class that we recommend, that people like, or they're asking about at the very least, is called Gnostic Runology. It's about the runes. It's basically in 3 parts, but the classes are similar to this astrology class, that it's going to be for a year or so studying that. The 3 parts are kind of the history and general mythological or symbolic aspect of runes, or information that'd be helpful to study the runes deeper. And then the historical aspect of how the runes became popular and where these exercises came from, of imitating the rune shapes and doing certain practices, and the popularity of the runes, because of course this merges with the popularity of what's called the Volkisch movement, which is something that was popular in German-speaking countries in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that eventually was sort of hijacked by the Nazis, or that they sort of took advantage of. And so there's certainly some elements that we want to understand so that we can speak to it. So when anybody says to us something that it's racist or something like that, that we can speak to that in an educated manner. So we cover that in the second part. And in the third part, we go into the different authors that have written about the runes that have influenced Huiracocha. And we know Samael Aun Weor recommends reading Huiracocha's runic course. So we'll read both of them, our 2 main authors, Huiracocha and Samael Aun Weor. And prior to that, we'll read some other Germanic authors, quoting from the German language sources. You know, we're going to primary sources, trying to give you guys that high-grade esotericism, and looking at what they said and how we can see in the first, let's say, 30 years of the 1900s, how this, I don't want to say infatuation, but interesting fascination with the runes developed, and people building off of each other, one author building off another. We can see that just in the Germanic field. And then Huiracocha, who was German, he goes over to Central and South America, setting up his FRA, Fraternidad Rosacruz, or Ancient Rose Cross Fraternity schools, of which we just read his astrology course, his zodiacal course. You know, he set up schools in various countries in Central and South America, and we study that material because it's interesting, it's helpful, there's a lot of wisdom in there, and there's some insight that we don't get from other authors. So those are the three main courses that we're talking about. Mystery Religions of the Ancients, the Gnostic Chemistry and Cosmology. It could also be called Introduction to Gnostic Kabbalah. And then Gnostic Runology. If you're interested in studying any of those, we're going to do next week's class. And then I thought we were going to do a meditation after that, but got a scheduling conflict, so I'm not sure when it will be. But next class will be our last class covering astrology, and we're going to jump into something else. So we want to see what you guys want to get into. Please, if you're interested in something, feel free to leave a comment or send us an email, gnosticstudies@gmail.com, and we can go from there. But all that talking was also to give you time to leave a comment if you wanted to. So now we don't see any questions or comments at this time. So we want to just say thank you. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for sticking with us in this class, in this study. We look forward to you joining next week for the final summary and conclusion. And so, thanks. And in the meantime, we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work.